Welcome to Draft Sickos on the No Ceilings NBA YouTube channel and podcast feed. This is the show where we discuss everybody from the biggest of names to the deepest of sleepers. And we're coming to you with a special Saturday night episode. The NFL, they said, hey, could you guys do us a favor? Could you not eat into our ratings too much and not compete with the big game on Sunday? Because you can't say the name.
They had the Luka thing already.
Yeah. Can you guys give us a break? Do us a little bit of a favor. And we said, all right, NFL, we'll do you guys a favor. We'll record on Saturday this week. So That's the plan. I'm your host, Maxwell Baumbach. I am joined by the real star of the show, Stephen Gillaspie. Stephen, how are you doing today?
Maxwell, I'm awesome, dude. I'm excited because normally, like a show like this isn't something that we typically do. Like these kind of like, I don't want to say more fun because I feel like we have fun, but it's generally more structured. And I feel like the pressure to like go in and be like, I got to be able to talk about X, Y, and Z with this player and make sure that we're hitting all of the notes on them. I think it's fun that we get to kind of come be a little bit vulnerable because I feel like today's subject, a lot of people have these things, but they don't want to say them to people because they might be afraid of a little like retaliation or, a negative viewpoint from people, especially like if they're publishing things like we are.
Yeah. So today we are going to do an episode based on takes that we're afraid to say out loud, and we're going to say them out loud, even if we're a little, you get some pushback, some angry DMs, some texts from people that aren't happy with us, some tweets, some skies, all sorts of stuff from people getting mad at us with our takes. I think some of them, I don't know. We also made the conscious decision to not tell each other what our takes are. We needed a YouTube thumbnail, so we each had to disclose one of the players we had a take about.
Just the name.
Yeah, just the name. So we know we're talking about Dylan Harper. We know we're talking about Miles Byrd, but that's like the extent of it. The rest of the show, we're going to kind of surprise each other. Do you want
That was really hard for me to do, by the way, to be like,
yeah,
Maxwell, I have these takes, and like I think even in our collective at No Ceilings, sometimes we'll throw out a question just to be like, okay, what about this person? And then someone will share a take and they're like, oh, I agree. Like someone finally like said the thing that I was thinking,
or even the classic, like, hey, why are these two guys so far apart? Kind of question. Yes. You know what I mean? So it's tough to keep those to yourselves, especially with someone that you're talking ball with on a regular basis. Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
I want you to go first, but before I do, we have some people in the chat. I think this would be fun. Like if you have a take in the chat that you're afraid to say out loud or something like that, drop it in here. And like, we have a great following. So please be respectful of everyone's takes. We may not even believe this. This just like, I'll tell you one of mine is like a fear that I have more so than it is a belief.
Sure.
Like I might not even believe this, but I could see an outcome that does scare me. Right. So that kind of thing. But everyone in the chat, like, please feel free to kind of share it. This could, help. We can help each other out a little bit.
Yeah. I will get mine off. I think Miles Byrd, and this is as of right now, obvious caveats. I think Miles Byrd is a top 10 prospect in this class.
Okay. I don't think it's crazy.
Yeah. It could be, but we'll see. I believe this though. So here's where I'm at with Miles Byrd. I understand the reservations about him as like a guy who's like skinnier and like generally with like the defensive oriented prospects, the ones that sort of scale up best are the ones that come in with like a ready-made body as well. Like if you look at Tari Eason, I certainly don't think it hurts that Tari Eason came into the league physically ready to plow through opponents. Like he came into the NBA able to withstand physicality and things like that. And that's not the case with Miles Byrd. Like Miles Byrd is like a slight, slender guy. And I think the big offensive knock on him. So defensively, the knock is he going to be strong enough to scale up? Offensively, the knock is he's a really poor finisher. Like he's 48.6% at the rim in the half court. He gets there a decent amount, 22.7% of his shots at the rim in the half court for a guy who's more of like a shooter is fine. Like that's like a decent clip for that type of wing. So I understand if you're just like physically, I really worry about how this scales up. production wise, I think we are talking about everything that's valuable in an NBA role player. He is 6'7" and he's still only 20 years old. Like, I think the fact that he's only 20 gets overlooked because people like view him as like, oh, he's like a junior or whatever. And it's like, this guy's young. This guy's young for the class. So with a lot of the wings that we're talking about in this range, like he is really not that much older than they are. And he is producing like crazy. Guys with a 6.1 DBPM that have like any level of offensive value tend to pan out. Steal rate of 4, block rate of 4.6. So he's averaging 3 stocks per game right now, 2 steals and 1 block per game. He's just all over the place defensively. Like he has such a great nose for the ball, such a great ability to read the opposing team's offense. Does he gamble a little bit? Sure. Point of attack stuff I think can get a little bit iffy at times just from like a technique standpoint. Like I don't think he slides quite as well as you might expect him to, but that's one of those things that I'm always bullish on guys being able to fix. And then offensively, like again, like what has me so intrigued here is we know that so much of NBA offense is predicated on just like shooting and moving the ball. And Miles Byrd is really good at that. Like even if you're like, okay, well, there's these finishing issues and whatever, we're getting really high level defensive playmaking production. And then we're also getting a guy who shoots threes at a really high clip and moves the ball. So he's taking almost 12 threes per 100 possessions and shooting 36.3% on them. He's like a career 84.6% free throw shooter. Really, like I'm a big like free throw percentage isn't always indicative of shooting guy. It's really hard to find guys that shoot that many threes and shoot over like 84% for whatever reason. And my data research tends to be like a really magical number free throw percentage wise. Like if you're over that and you're taking a ton of threes, I believe that you're a shooter. Okay. Also, very good decision maker, moves the ball really well, has like a bit of like what I call the secret sauce where like he's not, a point forward or a guy that you're going to run the offense through it all. But when he gets chased off the line, he can really look off his passes well, uses head and eye manipulation well to maximize his openings and hit those rollers. Like he's had some slick passes to Pharaoh Compton throughout the year. So I think ultimately like you're just getting what makes an NBA role player valuable. You're getting defensive production. You're getting ball movement. You're getting 3-point shooting. You're getting a guy who's able to scale down into a role pretty flawlessly. And he's only 20. Like usually when we're talking about these kind of traits, we're talking about like the old boring guys in the draft. Miles Byrd is 20. And like
Dalton Connect, kind of.
Yeah, and he's like a San Diego State guy too. So I just wonder, like, is he going to be able to fill out his frame a little bit more too when he's in an NBA, training session, everything like that. Like San Diego State by mid-major standards, great program, phenomenal program.
Yeah.
But I just wonder, like, resource-wise, is there more that you can tap into now that he's healthy and he's in an NBA program? So that's my spiel on Miles Byrd. I think there's an immense amount of safety in the production that we've seen that gives him a safe enough floor. And I think the fact that he's only 20 and producing at such an outrageous clip actually gives him like the quote-unquote like false ceiling upside.
I might have missed it, and that was a fantastic breakdown. Like I love Miles Byrd too. I have him like right there in that kind of like late lottery range. And he could go higher. I believe in him. Why were you afraid to say that out loud, Maxwell?
Because I feel like for one, he wasn't on ESPN's last top 100. So
that's true.
So there's people that are not seeing the Miles Byrd thing. And even on our latest sport, I think, was he 22?
Something like that. Yeah, I'd have to go back and look. Yeah, I know he wasn't as high as like what you and I had him. Yeah, and I think like the thing with Miles Byrd, and I feel like where I see him on mocks is generally like that late first range. And I think the reason that he's there is like this concept of like, oh yeah, it's like 3-and-D, he's safe. And I think that's where the consensus has him. And I think that is sort of underselling how uncommon this level of 3-and-D production is. Like if you look at guys who produce steals and blocks at the rate that he does, they're almost always bad shooters. Like the only guys that shot even close to him percentage-wise that produced like that on defense were Matisse Thybulle and Robert Covington. Again, body-wise, some differences there, but the three-point volume is way in Miles Byrd's favor when you're talking about those kind of guys. And plus the handling and passing feel and stuff.
Yeah,
like
Thybulle really struggled to put the ball on the deck.
Yes.
For Covington, that didn't really matter as much because he was kind of like a 4.
Finisher.
But for Thybulle, where it was like offensive, you have to be a 2-3, like whatever. And yeah, so body-wise, is he in the same spot as those guys? No. But in terms of just willingness to bomb threes, he's there, and ball skills, he's there. So I just think we're really underestimating how good the data says he is, and then B, just how plug and play it is, and to any NBA team concept.
I love it. Maxwell, Dirty Dancer in the chat said, I think Igor is a next year guy. I don't hate it. That's a fun, I'm afraid to say out loud, because he hasn't been super great, but a lot of people still have. I got a similar prospect that I'm going to bring up as one of my takes, but there hasn't been a lot of talk about him, but he's consistently been in like top 10s from what I've seen.
I think the thing with Igor is also just like the passing feel is so good that it's like hard to I know Yegor has like never made threes, but just the fact that he's taking them with the volume that he is, like, still has me being like, well, wait a minute, why does he think he can shoot to that degree? Because if he can, like, then we're really cooking with something. But I also fear that, like, if you looked at Nikola Durisic's like G League stats this year,
I have looked at a few G League stats, and I'm like, talk about inflated numbers for players. It's
Killian Hayes
crazy.
Is like averaging 40 a game there right now.
Yeah, it's wild stuff, man.
Duricic is shooting like 34% from the field and 20% from three. And when I look at Yegor, it's like, I know Yegor makes plays on defense, but just like seeing a guy who it's like, well, he can't really score, but he's tall and he's really got some interesting ball skills. Struggle like that in the G League has made me like a little bit nervous about Yegor.
Okay, so I'm going to go for, this wasn't going to be my first take, but based on the Yegor conversation, I'm going to kind of shift gears. I'm going to be malleable. My take that I'm afraid to say out loud is I don't know how good Ben Saraf is.
Ooh, interesting.
I don't know how good he is. Kind of similar to Yegor, right? And I have some notes, of course. I make notes. Yeah. He's like the only consensus lottery guy that you don't hear anybody discuss, like, ever. And I listen.
Yeah.
I'm not like I'm not going to sit here and proclaim myself to be like the foremost like podcast connoisseur ever, but I listen to tons and tons and tons of podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And no one has talked about, I don't even think that we have. And if you look and see, like, The Athletic mocked him 11th. And Sam,
I was going to say Sam and Bryce talked about him, and I feel like they are like one of the only places I've heard have the Ben Saraf talk.
Yeah, and Sam wrote that, and his exact words were he is one of his personal favorites.
Mm-hmm.
ESPN mocked him 12th, and Jeremy Woo stated that Saraf's level of size and feel warrant long looks in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Bleacher Report mocked him at 11th, and Jonathan Wasserman stated, scouts will surely debate his physical tools, explosiveness, and 29.3% three-point shooting for the NBA. And then us at No Ceilings, we have him 12th on our collective bid board. The highest person has him at 4. And Maxwell, you had him at 24. And if you want to know more for all you listeners out there of like who has who where, No Ceilings Plus, you can have access to all of our
everybody's boards. Yep.
Right. I haven't heard him discuss like much at all. Like, and I was hoping that the Tylers even did their last episode was like a help me help you. And I was like, please talk about Ben Saraf, but they didn't even talk about him, And I'm like, he's like the guy that I'll admit openly, like, and this is, I think, like the spirit of this episode is like things I'm afraid to say out loud. Of my top 30, he's like the guy that I put the least amount of time in. And like right now, I try to cast like a wide net and then kind of chisel it down a little bit. But I like his feel. I just don't think that he has like a crazy, like special skill that he's bringing, right? Like I don't have a good scout for him for having him as high as I do. And I don't feel good having him like 10th on my board right now.
Sure. So I will say Ben Saraf is actually a prospect I feel like I've not like written about hardly at all, but I've watched a ton of. And I feel like it's because like a lot of people I really respect, like obviously we talked about earlier, like have him really high. And I keep wondering what it is I'm missing. So here's my case for Ben Saraf still in the first round, which is like you mentioned, like what was it, 24 that I had him?
Yeah, you had him 24th in the
24.
last
Okay.
that we put him in.
I really like his feel. So he's like 6'4", 6'5". I like what he does offensively a lot in terms of his handle. Like, even when guys get right up on him, like, he does a little better with that than you would think, given his physical dimensions, just because he is really shifty with the ball. He's very good at playing ball screens in a multitude of ways. Really good at like stringing out the big man and pick and rolls and maximizing openings that way by just like getting them a little bit out of position. Keeps it alive really well. Like, very quick misdirection. Just kind of uses those funky little speed changes to freeze defenses and get guys off balance. Like, his movement patterns are a little unorthodox. Like, very good at just making people dance and maximize openings. And then his pass placement, like, I think on the, like, certainly bites off more than he can chew at times, but makes good, like, improvisational reads. Like, when he's on the go, the passes can still be accurate. He has that last second fluidity that I talk about all the time. So I really trust the overall level of feel. I think it's like kind of what we've talked about with like Liberian Phylon and like Yakashonis and some of those guys, where like there might be turnovers at times, but it's like, all right, well, when I see the flashes be so good, it's like what we talked about with like Keontae George in the league too, where it's like, if the passing flashes are really impressive in college, I usually buy the ability to like pare down on the mistakes a little bit more. That's kind of how I feel about all those guys. I think Saraf is a guy thrown into that bucket. Defensively, I have some concerns. Like, physically, he's going to have some limitations. He really struggles against mismatches, struggles against ball screens. His ground coverage is pretty limited. There's a couple plays where I saw him cheat out of the strong side corner, which always drives me nuts. But I think he has good anticipation and timing. He gets after the ball on the glass. I think his lateral foot speed is pretty good. His balance is good. He hustles. He makes a second effort anytime he ends up behind a play, even if his recovery isn't awesome. The concern with Sarah for me is the scoring and specifically the shooting. So he's 46.5% from the field, 25.9% from three, just under 70% from the free throw line. His pull-up looks great, and I hate to like over-index on like one indicator, but he's 47.1% on pull-up twos, but only 15% on pull-up threes, which is always dicey to me, right? Because it's like, well, which one of those is real and which of those is fake?
Right.
So that's terrifying. But he is a 35% catch and shoot player, and he actually gets downhill a lot. Like, he's 40% of his of his overall shots are at the rim. In the half court, it's still 33.2%, 56.4% at the rim. So still ultimately a good rim finisher with a really good pull-up shot and a good catch and shoot jumper that you hope that if that in-between ball steal stuff comes around, he might
catch and shoot.
Sure. More than fair,
right?
Especially relative to position, right? Like we always talk about, like for guards, like guards league average is 39% and not 36. Like it matters. So I think the overall idea is, can he get some good juice as a second side offensively tilted guard? I don't really see any like super high upside stuff from that. But I do think, like, I really don't like when people are like, oh, yeah, he's like a guard who can give you some offensive juice off the bench. Like, those guys are really dicey to me. But I think because he's 6'4" and has such high highs as a playmaker and the level of feel is so interesting and good, and, like, he's got that real deal handle, he's a guy that could actually be that.
Then why is a guy like Taron Armstrong not in the NBA?
I feel like he's a way better scorer than Taron was. And I think he's a better athlete too.
Okay.
And Taron like could not move defensively at all.
Exactly, right? So I'm just thinking kind of bigger guard, and the sales pitch is he's got great feel.
Sure.
Right? Like, and I kind of think like a Taron Armstrong was like a wizard with the basketball, like could pass the lights out, you know? But I don't know. Like, I know that I have to put more time into him, and this is me being just like open, honest, and vulnerable with everybody, right? Like, I genuinely think that he's the prospect that's like, well, everybody else has kind of got him in the lottery range, so I gotta, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's kind of like where he is. But this class is already kind of weird, where like shooting is like not that great, like especially like towards the top prospects within this class. And there's already a couple people that kind of do what he does.
Yeah.
And he's got kind of like worse indicators than a lot of those players do.
Yeah, I'm trying to just like, I know like obviously this is a different thing because we're looking at like college numbers, but I'm trying to like sort Bartorvik for like sub 6'5" guys that shot like under 30% from three that got drafted.
A lot of them are going to be, I'm going to bet that a lot of them are athletic freaks or like defensive stoppers, right?
It's Marcus Smart,
like Westbrook,
young Jamal Shed, young Donovan Mitchell, like freshman year Mitchell, freshman year Ivy, Io,
probably like Zach Levine
has wing measurements. Yeah. Freshman year Buddy Hield, Bruce Brown, Maxie, who had like a weird down shooting year. So would Maxie be the case? And like this is like me not remembering Saraf's priors off the top of my head. Did Saraf have good shooting priors at all? No, not really. Like
no, the shooting was like the concern coming in. It was like
sub 30.
It was like the if he shoots it guy, like at the top of the board, pretty much. Okay. And he hasn't shot it, you know, and he's not like a great defender. He's not a great shooter. And then, like, you can only put so much pressure on the rim in the NBA against defense if the only thing you can do is, like, drive. You know what I mean? And
yeah. Well,
is that like...
that's where the physical stuff comes in. Because it's like as good as the handle is he still able to create those advantages the same way when he doesn't have, like... So if we look at AJ Mitchell, right, who I feel like is like my go-to comp now for like low volume 3-point shooting guards. It's like he was so much stronger. And obviously like a better defender too, like not only just because of the physical stuff, but just like how he's able to move. And like I was leery of AJ. I was too low on AJ Mitchell, but like a big part of it was like, oh, he doesn't really pressure the rim, but it's like, but he was able to get into the paint so much more in the NBA. Part of that might be, you could say it's Oklahoma City's offense, but I think an undeniable part of it too is the combination of craft and power.
I think free throw rate is it's starting to become like a lesser truth for me as to like, can they get to the basket? You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of players that I've been watching recently that have lower free throw rates, but they're in the paint all the time. They just don't like draw the contact. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's weird, but yeah, that's where I am with Ben Saraf, dude. Like I have him top 10. And there's been a lot of players that have been kind of like underwhelming to me.
Yeah, you're kind of talking.
And I've been trying to, and I'm kind of like, what's the special with Ben Saraf? Like, how come no one is talking about this guy, but everyone has him lottery? Like everyone has him lottery, but there is like no discussion on him.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So we will take a quick break and we will be back on the other side. So stick with us. We will be right back with some more takes we're afraid to say out loud. All right. Do you want to snake draft it and go again?
Yeah. I'm gonna get into this one because he's the thumbnail guy that I kind of shifted away from. Bring him up first, but
Steven is frozen at the moment.
Warranted pivoting it a little bit. I don't necessarily believe this, but there's like a tiny part of me that can see this happening. And I don't want to say it out loud because I don't want to speak it into existence.
Okay.
I think that Dylan Harper has like the highest bust probability among the top 3 prospects in this class.
Okay, so before we dive into the statement, who are your top 3 prospects in this class? So we can decipher who
Cooper Flag.
Okay.
Dylan Harper, who I did have at number 1 at one point, so I want to make it abundantly clear that I am a super big Dylan Harper fan. And then I have Ace Bailey as the 3rd prospect.
Oh, wow. Okay. See, I think Ace's like bust potential is so much higher just because like for my column this week, I was actually thinking about Jabari Smith a little bit because I wrote about some scouting misses.
Yeah.
And one of the things I feel like I weirdly didn't anticipate with Jabari Smith is like, what if he is a little bit less of a shooter than his college percentage indicates? Because like a lot of times guys just shoot worse in the league than they do in college. Guys don't always just shoot the same way or get better at shooting all the time. It doesn't work that way necessarily. If Ace is like a league average 3-point shooter and then like the passing doesn't get better and then like he still has a lot of defensive lapses, like it's gonna be ugly. I know we just talked about AJ Mitchell, but the thing I come back to with Dylan Harper is it's like a lot of the same stuff where it's like high feel, a lot of rim pressure, a lot of power, balance, and coordination. And I just think he's at least that. Like, I just think no matter what, he's got that going for him. I also kind of see the vision in that, like, the defensive playmaking numbers have never been awesome. I'm like way skeptical of the shot, I think, relative to most people, because he's like 35.1% from three. He tends to shoot it worse against good teams. The release point is super low. Like, I think there are worlds where Dylan ends up being like a player. I think like the downside is that he ends up being a player that's not super conducive to winning, because he's primarily a player who creates his value from having the ball in his hands, but struggles to generate off-ball gravity, and then is like not doing a ton defensively. Like, I think that's like the disaster scenario. But I think relative to Ace, the fact that he has like a bankable skill and his just rim pressure and feel for his age makes me feel a lot better. But I'm interested to hear your line of thinking here.
Yeah, so Cooper Flagg is like obviously like hands down the number one prospect, right? And the worst thing about him throughout the year has been the shooting. Like, even if the shooting doesn't come around, I feel like the floor for Cooper, like, let's just say he's like a career 34% three-point shooter in the NBA. He's going to have a crazy amount of value for defense, passing, rebounding. Just like, he's going to be able to contribute in probably the most amount of ways compared to any other prospect within this class. Ace, I feel like his floor could be Jabari Smith Jr., right? Like, at his absolute floor could be Jabari Smith, because you worry about the handle, you worry about the passing, but he can shoot and he can defend. Like, that's kind of what Jabari Smith does. And he's like a very reliable rotational player, right? Like Cooper's, like Cosmo says in the chat, Cooper's floor is Scotty Barnes. I think that that's like a Franz Wagner, Scotty Barnes, somewhere around there, right? Like, he could be like that type of player. What I worry about with Dylan, only a tiny bit, again, second prospect on my board. I had him over Cooper to start the year. I am like one of the biggest fans of Dylan Harper that you'll ever meet. But let's just say that, like, he struggles with the separation to create, and the shot isn't around. What is he in the NBA? He's not a top 3 pick if that's the truth. And that's why I'm saying, like, that's like the bust probability factor for me. Like, if the greatest strengths of these players, or like the thing that they need to do the most, isn't there, I think that Dylan Harper is the least valuable of the 3.
I think, I just think Ace is like so scary. Like, he's
scary, but I think he's. So I think he has the potential to get so much better that, like, the stuff that he's already showing now is reliable. Sure.
But also, like, if Dylan Harper just like fixes his release point and then is like actually a good shooter, then like he's awesome. Like, then he's an all-star. You know what I mean? The doubt we should also give it to Dylan. I also just think Dylan's like, I don't want to draw this parallel because they're so different body wise. But like, looking, I hate that I'm going to say this because they're so different body wise. It's like flies in the face of how I try to make comps in every sense. Amen Thompson, like opposite sides of like the physical body type and movement spectrum. Cosmo, just say it, MB.
Just say it.
Yeah. Like, right, but like, we've seen what you can generate offensively, like when you have a guy who just is able to pressure the rim even in lieu of a jump shot, and the way they go about it is like so wildly different. And obviously, like, the defensive value is like night and day, like not going to be particularly close in terms of the defensive production and how often they're able to just generate different possessions and force teams into bad looks in the clock, blah, blah, blah. But I do think in the half court offense, like, we've seen ways that these kind of guys can produce with how creative teams are getting, and then how many just threes other guys shoot now. I think for certain wing players, it can get a little bit easier in some senses if you can actually get downhill. And I think that's the difference with like a Dylan Harper style player with the handle and that sort of stuff allows him to get downhill versus like a Mark Mitchell, where we're talking about a guy where it's just like, well, if he can't shoot, he's just screwed because he's not going to like put the ball on the deck and create anything. Right. That I think with Dylan, there's openings, even if the shot is like, okay. If the shot's like horrific, maybe not, like maybe then it gets a little weird, but I just think the combination of like age, size, playmaking, feel just feels too bankable to me.
I just think that the concerns with Ace are very real because I think as a top 3 guy, you're going to want somebody who you can trust to be like a primary scorer. Mm-hmm. And there is a probability that Ace is going to be he's going to rely on others to set him up, right? Like, and I get that. But he's already like super polarizing, but I feel like, like increased strength. He's in a system right now that the only time that he's been entrusted to like run an offense are the few games that Dylan has already been out with ankle sprain problems. So that was kind of like I don't like that. But I feel like he's going to come in with like ready to go talents without the ball in his hand. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And like the defensive side is actually like really, really good, right? Like I think the defense from Ace is pretty, like there are flashes of it being good in like a Jaden McDaniels when he was at Washington type of way. Okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's where I'm like a little leerier is if I bought like, I think the defense has been much better lately in terms of just like engagement, rebounding, like whatever. I still think it's a little too inconsistent for me to like fully buy into.
But and a lot of times for like forwards, especially like young ones, it's all about tools because it's like, what do you have to bring to the NBA? And I always point at Jaden McDaniels in this way because he was not like a very well thought of prospect coming out of Washington when he did. Like I loved him. I think I had him like 5th or 6th or whatever on my board at that time. But a lot of people were like super, and he was a late 1st round guy because there were so many inconsistencies, right? I think that Ace has the tools to come in and be a guy who goes to a team and just like shows out in the NBA because he's got the athleticism, the tools to be able to do it. And the shot is there and he hits crazy, ridiculous shots. And again, I love Dylan. I'm not moving him at all, probably the entire time from number 2. I just think that like, if I'm sipping truth serum, and this was really hard for me to say out loud because I don't want it to be true. I'm afraid I'm going to jinx my guy. I just think that like, if the creation isn't as good in the NBA as what a lot of us think it's going to be, that severely hampers like how good of an NBA player he's going to be.
Yeah. And I think I'm just like fully sold on that with him. And I could be wrong, but I really buy it. I'll do my negative take now. Let's make this the negativity section of the show.
Let's hate all of our favorite players together.
Yeah, let's get everyone mad at us after we talked about guys we love in the first segment. I would be afraid to draft Jeremiah Fears in the 1st round.
Let's go. Let's have this conversation. I'm with it.
I am just not a believer. I like the idea long term of like this guard is really tough. That he is a really high usage player. It's like Metcalf. If you haven't read Tyler Metcalf's article on Jeremiah Fears, I think it's a really good, like positive take on Jeremiah Fears.
Yeah,
both in terms of like the tape and then also the data, because like Metcalf has some really good stuff on just high usage guards at a young age, whatever. Like generally speaking, if you generate a ton of usage at the high major level as a freshman guard, that means a lot. Like it is not meaningless. And Jeremiah Fears has a huge usage rate, 31.2 on the year. And even in conference play, it's still 31.8. He's not small. Like he's listed at 6'4". He's probably like 6'3". He's filled out his frame really well. Like I want to be clear too. I'm rooting for Jeremiah Fears. Jeremiah Fears is from Joliet, which is like right down the road from me. I want all my local guys to succeed. Like I'm a homer for these guys. I want Jeremy Fears to succeed too at Michigan State, by the way. Very good guard as well.
I was a big fan of Tears for Fears. I love that band.
Yeah. Also a good band.
Yeah.
Wow. I haven't thought about Tears for Fears in ages.
Everybody wants to rule the world.
Yeah. So you've got that. You've got a good assist rate, 29.4 assist rate, and like just generates a ton of steals, 3.6 steal rate. All that is good. I am not sure that he does enough or that it's scalable enough against good competition to be something that I am excited about as a this year prospect. So I am going to pull the BART numbers here, and I'm also running some Hoop Explorer queries. But the other day when I ran the BART numbers, he had a negative BPM in conference play, which is pretty scary. Generally, you want guys to be better against good competition. Yeah, so in, let's see, conference play, negative 0.5 BPM. That goes to 0.7 in 11 games against top 50 quality opponents. So a lot of his production stemmed from games against bad teams early in the year.
Yeah.
He really struggles to shoot. He's a 27.6% three-point shooter. Their free throw percentage is really good. So if you want to use that as an indicator, and like I said earlier, like 84 is a really high number, and tends to be a really meaningful one. There is like a touch indicator in that sense. He's also 44.1% on his pull-up too. So there are reasons to get excited. But I think anytime you're dealing with like a sub 28% three-point shooter whose value is derived from having the ball in their hands all the time, it's a lot of like what we talked about with Ben Saraf. And the reason I have Saraf higher than Fears is because of that playmaking feel and that passing. Fears has that high assist rate, but his assist to turnover ratio is barely positive in conference play.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've seen people be like, oh, well, like Oklahoma's not very good. Here's where I will push back on that. So
I like Jalen Moore.
Yeah. So I think they're actually like from an NBA scouting perspective, does Oklahoma have other guys I'm interested in? No. But if you look at the Hoop Explorer data against top 200 opponents, the team is like really no better or worse with Jeremiah Fears on the floor or not. Like offensively and defensively. Like their net rating is actually a little bit higher offensively with him on the bench. So it's 21.2 with him on, 23.5 with him off. Defensively, 1.9 with him on, 1.0 with him off. So like
they're not like guard heavy either.
No. Yeah. So if you want to be like, well, it's his teammates. Well, then if his teammates are so bad, why are they no better or worse, whether he's on the floor or not? There have been games this year where like he's had a bunch of defensive lapses. He's forcing things offensively. They'll put him on the bench like for pretty prolonged periods of time. Like 28.5 minutes per game is like not a lot. Like the game against Texas A&M, he played 19 total minutes. Like 25 minutes the other day against Auburn. Like they don't. If I felt like there was a way that I could guarantee he impacted the game at the next level, I would be a lot more interested. I'm not sold on the passing. I worry about how the defense scales up because he gets lost off the ball quite a bit. He gets downhill pretty well, but he just completely lacks a jump shot. And I don't know, like I just don't like the idea of drafting this type of guard in the first round, where it's like the score first guard in general is sort of like losing value at a pretty high clip. In absence of playmaking, when we have like these 6-7 guys that are going to give you defensive value, and then they're also going to shoot, and then they're going to make plays, and like you can just do so much more with them. Where I guess 6'3", 6'4" guy who sort of just scores and like rebounds a little bit and gets steals, but is otherwise sort of a mess defensively and can't space the floor and doesn't bring any value off the ball. Like I'm just not particularly interested in that type of player. Especially when the production and on-offs are this bad against real teams. So that's my Jeremiah Fears thing.
And I would need to dive into this a little bit more. And this is why we do the shows in the format that we normally do, and we share with each other who we're going to talk about. Because one thing that I would have looked up if I would have known that we're going to talk about Fears is like, okay, how does his free throw rate look compared to like a John Morant or a Dame Lillard or a Russell Westbrook? Or how does his
free throw rate's really
dunks,
good? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how does his half court dunks compare to those guys? Mm-hmm. You know, like I know that they're good. Because that's the comparison. Those are the comparisons that I think that if you're not going to shoot, you're a high usage guard, and your thing is athleticism. That's
He's
a pretty high bar to clear.
Yeah.
You know?
So I just ran the dunks. He has 0 half-court dunks this year and 5 dunks total. So I'm going to pull up my players who stuck in the NBA spreadsheet and see kind of who we're talking about in that range. So let's say conservatively he ends with like 8 or 9 dunks around the year. That grades out like decent for a guard. But we're talking like Miles McBride levels of athlete. Jordan Poole, Tyrese Maxey, Bruce Brown. So there's like some good athletes in that mix, but we are far from the Jalen Suggs, Alex Caruso, Grayson Allen, Chris Dunn, John Morant, Lonzo Ball. Lonzo Ball is just a lot of transition, but like Gary Payton, like those kind of guys that were like out in the open floor. Like he's not there.
Yeah, and that's my concern is like when I watched him like in games, I don't see like the nuclear athleticism that we saw with like a John Morant or that we saw with a Russell Westbrook or a Damian Lillard or those kind of 6'4" and under heavy, like no one could touch Derrick Rose. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that type of guard. I don't see that same level of athleticism nor that same level of the desire to just want to like go into the chest of somebody. You know what I mean? He doesn't have like that same level. I'm not saying he's not capable, but I don't think that he's the type of guy that's going to do that at the clip of the type of guard that he's going to need to be that successful in the NBA. Like I have him in the back half of my lottery because I do have a lot of those same concerns. That's why I was so animated whenever you brought him up, is because I feel like a lot of people look at him in that way where I do see him mocked like 6th on big boards.
Yeah, and there's people in our collective that have him here. And like someone on Twitter, the reason I brought this up is someone on Twitter the other day tweeted our board and was like, why is Jeremiah Fear so low? And I was like, it's because my grade is dragging him down. Like, to be frank, like I have him lower than anybody else. Like, it's me. I'm high. I'm the problem. It's me. As a wise woman once said. Like I am the outlier there. I completely recognize that. But yeah, that's where I like have such a hard time. It's like, I feel like even the best case scenario that we're talking about here is just a player type that is sort of not that valuable in terms of what the NBA is right now. Barring outlier development. Like he could, like, I mean, look, did you think Tyrese Maxey was going to be a point guard? You know what I mean? Like some of the stuff where like a legit point guard, like probably not.
I'm afraid to say where I had Tyrese Maxey compared to the other guards that were coming out. Like there, but I don't know. Like I think barring outlier development, like a world where he ends up being super, super valuable just doesn't seem likely to me. And I think the world where there's just not any value here is really plausible too.
Yeah, like look at what like a De'Aaron Fox did too, like as like a high, like a low, like smaller guard, high usage. Crazy good. Like I feel like his feel was better, the athleticism was better, even though he's probably more on like like, and he was like a scrawnier guard. He wasn't like a big, powerful, like athletic, bursty guy. Like he was very much so like a greyhound almost. You know what I mean? Like, and the amount of things that he's had to overcome in order to be the second guy in San Antonio now next to Victor Wembanyama, like the bar is really high for that type of guard to be successful. And I don't think that enough people are acknowledging the warts that he has.
Yeah, I'm actually curious now because De'Aaron Fox was like also like a lower BPM guy. Like I'm kind of wondering what his was against good competition in college. And granted, he probably had a bit better of a situation just being at Kentucky.
Sure. And he gets the Kentucky bump.
Okay.
There's no
he would have been
bump.
6.4 in conference games. I think I transposed his BPM incorrectly. I did. Okay. Yeah. Never mind. Disregard all that. We're going to go. I think we can put a bow on that part. Do you want to do one more break and then finish it up?
Yeah.
Cool. I got one more negative one, so this will be fun.
Okay. All right. We'll be right back. All right. Do you want to kind of like lightning round these, or do you have one that you want to like ruminate on a little bit?
I have one that I want to just like get your thoughts on. And then I know that we had talked about emptying the chamber, so to speak, because we were like
what if we kind of overlap because we're podcast co-hosts and sometimes we have marriage brain, and I'm really proud of the fact that like we haven't like stepped on each other's toes yet. That's pretty cool. I want to share one, and it's just because it breaks my heart.
Okay.
And I hate this. I'm afraid to say it out loud because I've kind of like been living in denial. I don't think that Kam Jones is going to go in the first round, dude. Like, I don't.
Man,
had a good game. He had a good game today.
Yeah.
Which kind of is like a curse, like in a good way this time. But normally, like when I like write about somebody or I'm about to speak about somebody like on a podcast, usually my take is like immediately contradicted by like their most immediate performance. And Kam did have a good game today. I think he scored like 20 points. He was pretty efficient, had assists and stuff like that. He started out the season so strong, and I was like, vindication, you know, like I'm my guy. I was high on him last year, high on him coming into the year. I think that he's going to get drafted. I think that he's probably going to go no later than like 37, 38 or something like that, right? But
he's better than Antonio Reeves was.
That's great.
You know what I mean?
A lot of people like Antonio Reeves.
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. It's like I think the idea of like ultimately, is he the most, you know, is he the biggest? No. Is he the best defender? No, but like it's still a guy that like can score a couple places, and like
Antonio Reeves was like a knockdown 3-point shooter.
Yeah, and he tries harder on defense. Like,
yeah, the shot has like gone away. Like, before tonight, his last 15 games, he has averaged 18 points, six assists, 4 rebounds, 1.5 steals, right? That sounds good, but during those 15 games, his splits were 43, 27, and 67. Like, and Marquette has talent. It's not like a Hunter Salas situation, in my opinion.
Sure.
Like, and Marquette's like 10-5 during that stretch, so you can kind of give he's making winning plays pitch if you want to, right?
Too. Yep.
He's like a super senior guard with like the warts that guards in the NBA are going to have to like overcome. And his efficiency just is like hit the toilet recently. And it's like he was going to be he was a player of the year candidate to a lot of people for a good portion of the year. And he's just, the shooting has been streaky. And like, if you're going to be a sub 6'6" creator, like you got to shoot, especially if you're probably not going to be heavily featured on the ball. You got to be a floor spacer. I think his career 3-point percentage is like 35%.
Yeah,
or something along those lines.
And where I will give him some credit is like the off the catch numbers are still good. He's 38.1% off the catch this year. Yeah.
I just think that he was on pace earlier on in the year to be like, like after the lottery, sure. Yeah, we're like a winning team is going to pick him up like easy day. And now I'm thinking that like, depending on how many freshmen want to come out and things like that, people might be more inclined to pick a kind of project-y, not quite there guard over him now. Whereas I would say about a month or so ago, people would be like, oh no, we're picking give me the guy who's ready made. You know what I mean?
I would agree with that. So where I'm at with Kam is like, it's tricky because like going throughout his career, he's had seasons where he shot really well and pulled threes, and there's years where he hasn't. The idea of Kam Jones that you were kind of discussing, where like early in the year, it's like National Player of the Year candidate, like you take him over the project guards, like whatever. I feel like that was so much because it's like, oh my gosh, he is draining these threes at the same clip he always has, and he's got this huge assist rate, and he's running balls,
he's creating,
and he's like doing all this, and it's like, that version of him is awesome. But if he's like a high variance pull-up shooter, and then we're talking more back into like the role that you'd kind of pictured going into the year, where it's like off-ball guard who can really score and like has really great touch at the rim, like that's just not as interesting as like what we thought we were getting for a little bit there. I also am like a little perplexed at times too. Like he's a great finisher despite like not being able to jump, which is so cool. Like I just respect it at this point. His touch is absurd. Like there'll be times where he gets like the worst angle at the rim I've ever seen, and he still makes it. And obviously like buying tough shot making would be tricky, but he's so prolific at it that I still kind of where I like struggle with him is like he's got this great assist rate and he has a crazy low turnover rate. Like he's like a 9.5 turnover rate. And I feel like
it stayed like that throughout the year too. That hasn't been streaky. The scoring oddly has been streaky, but the playmaking this year has been consistent, which was like kind of the knock coming in.
What I will say though is I feel like I've never seen an on-ball player with such a low turnover rate where I feel like the ball gets so far away from his body so often. Like in traffic, I'm just like, whoa, get that dribble under control. And then like,
it's pretty wide at times.
It's so hard for me to like wrap my head around. Like, I don't want to like be a no eye test guy whatsoever. But also it's like the data says he doesn't turn the ball over. You know what I mean? So it's like, well, how much should I realistically punish him for that? Like, because that's the thing that scares me with the on-ball stuff. It's like he's not a natural separator. If you're worried about him creating off pull-ups, like the value's gone there. And then like if you do worry about the handle, like then like he's back to that off-ball role that we talked about earlier. Yeah, a low free throw rate, like also weirdly like a sub 70% free throw shooter throughout his career, despite being like a great touch guy who's always shot threes well. Yeah, I'm really confused by Kam. I thought Kam was gonna make one of the more simple evaluations of just like, oh, good guard. And like now it's a little bit more complicated again. I think I'm with you. I think he's a guy I'd feel so much more comfortable with if I'm like a good team in the second that has sort of like defensive size and insulation around him. And it's just like, this is a guy that if we need to play, we can. Like, I feel like Boston's a bad example at this point because they have a lot of depth. But it's like if Boston took him, you'd be like, I feel fine about him there. Because like there's the defensive insulation, there's multiple ball handlers, there's other guards that can take the tougher defensive assignment. And then it's like,
like if Cleveland took him or something.
But even then too, if it's like if I'm Boston, like why am I do I think he's going to be better than like Baylor Shireman? You know what I mean? Like, am I drafting him and then like just getting another offensively tilted guy when I already have a perfectly fine one that's bigger? I don't know.
JD Davidson's like killing it in the G League. Like, let's give this guy a shot, you know?
Yeah. So I think that's where it gets dicey. Is I don't know how much teams are going to prioritize this type of player. I think he could be a sneaky fall guy. I also think he's a guy that like could go to the combine and play in the scrimmages and then just be way better than everybody. And then everyone gets right back.
And if they end up in the tournament and he has like 2 30-point games or something like that, like that could really recover whatever stock hit that he is like taking on, you know?
Sure. I'll do a positive one to get some happiness back on.
Let's do it.
Are we sure Eric Dailey isn't a first-round guy?
I like Eric Dailey.
Him and
Dailey Swain both have been like pretty fun watches for me.
Yeah. And so what I like about Dailey relative to Dailey Swain is I'm kind of buying the shot. A little bit funky, but he's at 37.7% on the year. Volume is low. Like we're taking, I guess it's 6.8 per 100, but it's snail's pace UCLA offense. So and
UCLA never knows who they want to be their go-to guy on a game-to-game basis.
But like a prototypical Maxwell Steven guy, 6'8", 230, big, strong dude who defends and knows how to play basketball. Really smart playmaker, like so good defensive. Like the defensive playmaking numbers aren't anything crazy, like weirdly a low block guy, but like a 3 steal rate. Just someone who always knows where to be, very fundamental, very like in his stance, plays with physicality and toughness. You don't get anything easy against him. Solid rebounder. I really trust the decision making, the passing, and he's a guy where like eye test wise, he takes those mid range like pull up shots, and I'm like, man, that looks good. Like I really just sort of trust the touch with him, and if I'm trusting, hey, this guy's got a great frame. I like him a lot on defense. He's going to give me some rebounding. I like how he makes decisions. Then really all that we're worried about at that point is like, is he going to shoot? And I think he can. So I just pulled up synergy numbers, 9 for 18 on pull-up twos this year. Like 6 for 11 on pull-up threes. Catch and shoot threes, not good. The shot is a real concern. But I just go back to the thing again where it's like, I feel so much more confident taking the guys where the one thing I need to work out is the shot, and the shot's not bad, but I really like everything else. I really like Eric Dailey. I think I had him in like early second on our boards, and like, you could really talk me into him.
Yeah, I just had him outside my top 60. And again, I'm working down a list of players, and then I'm going to go through and like do a lot of refinement. But I was pleasantly surprised on Dailey. And I think you and I talked about like, man, between like Javon Small and Eric Dailey, like how the heck did Oklahoma State just like blow it? You know what I mean? Yeah, like they had some really good players on their team. And I like that, man. Like that's a good one. I think that the size is there. The scoring versatility has shown to be like much, much better this year. And obviously, like you got the potential to be a really impactful defender and rebounder, which makes you positionally versatile in the NBA too. So, I mean, physicality is something that of course, I've been preaching, and Eric Dailey has that as well. I think that makes a lot of sense, dude. That's a good positive one. You want to empty the chamber a little bit? You want to do like one for one, or do you want to go down the list and you go down the list?
I've got like a couple that I like actually thought about bringing up.
I just got like two.
So we can go one for one. Yeah, I've got two that I like actually kind of want to get out there.
Okay.
Do you want to go first or do you want me to?
I'll go. I think Boogie Fland is going to come back to school because of the injury. And I hate to say this, but I think he's going to leave Arkansas with like Darius Acuff coming in. I think he's going to come back and transfer.
Interesting. I'm here for it. I'm intrigued. I would be interested to see him in a different environment.
Yeah, and I hate it because you know me, I'm an Arkansas guy. I would love for him and Acuff both to be on the same team. Like that would be a ton of fun. Together. And I loved Boogie coming in. But I don't get a good vibe about this class like moving forward. And I'll kind of
guard
leave it at that.
Money in college is going to be really good still too, is the thing.
Yes.
Like we've got the confluence of college teams wanting guards that they can trust, which Boogie is at the college level, NBA teams being out on smaller guards, and then the logjam that you mentioned. It's also like I think DJ Wagner is probably going to be there for another year, and whether or not you want to prioritize DJ Wagner, like everyone's going to have their own opinion on that. Like I feel like he's like a high variance of opinions.
He was a Cal guy. You know?
That's the thing. Is like I don't see that relationship getting broken. So then Boogie kind of quickly becomes the odd man out between the top recruit and the guard that you've had follow you to this school.
And I don't feel good about it, man, because again, I want him. I liked him. I still like him. There's obviously like no one please aggregate this. This is just like a hunch. Like I have no intel stating this or anything. This is just like as an Arkansas fan, I'm afraid to say it out loud because I really like Boogie, but I think he's going to go back to school and not be a Razorback.
I'm gonna sneak one negative one in here.
Okay.
Maxime Raynaud. Been much better than I anticipated this year. I will give him credit. I understand teams wanting to roll the dice. I watched Quinton Post, and you, sir, are no Quinton Post. I just do not buy the shot the same way I did with Quinton Post. Percentage-wise, it's lower. Volume-wise, he's getting them up. I just don't really trust how the shot looks, and I think we are underestimating how poor some of the rim protection is and the rim defense. Like I think he knows where to be defensively. Like he rebounds his butt off. Like the effort is there. But I think he has a lot of the same like physical power concerns that Post had. But I think he's much worse with his hands and drop coverage. And I think there's like just a sizable difference in terms of how much I trust them to make decisions as passers. Where I feel like Post, I really liked when they'd run offense from him. Raynaud has flashes, but then also does some stuff where I'm like, you can't be doing that when you're a fourth-year college guy.
Exactly.
And I just, like the hand positioning stuff on defense. Like I just don't know where you're really lining him up there, where he's like staying above board on defense. So between that, not really buying the shot, not really buying the passing. I had Quinton Post in guaranteed contract range last year. Was glad to see him get that this season. He earned it in Golden State. I would not feel comfortable with Maxime Raynaud in that same range. And I feel like he's the guy who's been sneaking up into that territory.
Yeah, I have him late first, and I don't feel good about it. If I was a team, if I didn't have a lottery pick, I would want to trade for like a bunch of second rounders. Like that would be my thought process going in, which I'll tie that into my last take. I think that this is going to be a very shallow class because of players wanting to come back.
I agree.
And I just think that it's going to be a lower impact class. And I hate to say that out loud. And because we're draft dudes, like we will tout any draft class. Like, and I don't know how you feel about this, Maxwell. I feel like
last year's draft class was covered in more detail by a wider brush of people at this point
weird.
of the year last year. And I think I want to blame it on Cooper Flagg because we have a clear-cut number one guy, and we have like a 3 or 4, maybe 5 player battle for like the rest.
Yeah.
And then like no one knows who's going to go after
that. And I feel I can't believe how much I feel like I've got like 20 guys that I like, but I can't even believe like in that group how much I've moved around guys.
Yeah.
Like I did not anticipate as much like fluidity and movement on my board as there has been.
Like people who love the draft and discuss the draft aren't doing it as much this year. And I think that's incredibly like apparent. And I think that speaks to the depth of this class. And again,
people just aren't that interested. And there hasn't been a Furphy yet. Maybe it's Flory.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like Flory, ironically enough, being
it's got to be a Kansas guy, yeah.
But it's like ironically just like the guy who like all of a sudden people are like, wait, hold on a minute. Like statistically, this guy looks like an NBA guy, or like this guy's doing that or whatever. Like I feel like it might be him. But yeah, I think there is just sort of a fall off point in this year's class. Like I changed my board making process a bit this year, where it's like, who are the guys I'd 100% feel comfortable taking in the first round? And like I did that, then I was like, oh man, there's a lot of first round picks left. Like I was like, oh boy, like there's a lot of guys here where it's like each, like I think I might have, and who knows how this could change, right? But I feel like I had more guys in guaranteed contract range last year than I'm going to this year.
Yeah, and I found myself like I've scouted, I think almost like 270, like 275 guys by this point. And I'm still finding guys that I'm like, why can't he be as good as like this guy that I have at like 60 or 70 or 80, somewhere in that range. And the guys that I have in that range are like names that should be getting drafted this year. And I think that is kind of making it sort of weird. Because I think that probably next year's class is going to be ridiculous. Like I think next year's class is going to be super fun to discuss because of the top end talent, but the guys who are probably going to want to return to like build on their draft stock, the sleeper guys that you and I have been talking about, it just feels like this class is kind of oddly boring considering that we're probably going to get one of the best players in recent college basketball history.
Yeah, the college player in the last 5 years that I'm most excited to watch play in the NBA. It's like,
yes.
Other than him, though, it's not. Yeah, that's a good point. I would agree with that. My last one, weird. I'll end with a positive one. I think Chad Baker-Mazara might be the best old guy value play in this draft.
So older Chad than Luka?
Like legit, is he?
Yeah, like that has. I thought that's where you're gonna go because I can't tell you how many like Twitter X posts that I have seen where they're like, everyone's outraged about Luka, and Dallas is a crazy scene right now. Like I am so glad that I don't live there, but there have been so many people who are just like giving strays at Chaz Baker-Mazara because he's older than Luka, and they're like, and this is. Like, and we traded Luka Doncic for a 31-year-old. Like, Chaz Baker-Mazara is just as close to AD's age as he is.
So Chad Baker-Mazara is 25. He will turn 26 during January of his rookie season. So I think Luka is older because I think Luka turns 26 next month. This month. But yes, he turns. So they're both 25 years old right now. So this is where the Chad Baker-Mazara thing is like, oh, I don't know about this. Age. Yeah. This man is very old by prospect standards. Number 2, he's really wiry and skinny.
Yes.
3, never had a super high usage rate, which is always, I beat that drum, always a little scary. 4, gets himself into a lot of extracurriculars. Like very famously was booted like 5 minutes into the NCAA tournament game last year and then tweeting from the locker room and then they lost to Yale. You don't love to see that. Also, the guys like bounce around schools. Teams are to do their background on that. I don't know like anything about Chad Baker-Mazara as a dude, so like I'm just not going to speak to it at all.
Sure.
What I do know is like, oh man, this guy's really good at basketball. Like this guy is really, really good at college basketball at the very least.
Yes.
To the point where I'm still like tempted to have him in that guaranteed contract range. He is a career 40.3% 3-point shooter on 8.3 threes per 100 possessions, which is great volume and great efficiency. Really nice handle, like really slick downhill game, like very good putting on the deck, like gets to the rim fast because he's bouncy and explosive, but then he's got this middle counter game, like can put dudes on skates, sees the floor well, and then defensively like uses those same tools in his lengths to just get into everything. I get that like we're talking about a guy who's going to turn 26 during his rookie year, and like I don't know, a lot of guys are out of the league like physically by 30, and like if you were to draft him in the first round, like he will be 30 like or close. Yeah, he would turn 30 during his initial 4-year contract. Like that's weird and scary. I get it. But when I look at what the NBA is, where it's like move the ball, play defense, shoot threes, and then like be able to find ways to get to the rim if you chase off the line, like Chad Baker-Mazar just does all of it. That it's like I feel like there's a world where I end up with him at 31, just because it's like I don't want to commit the first round to you, but if I get you like on like a not like some sort of guarantee where it's like shorter term or like an option or something where I can insulate myself a little bit, I would love that because he's really good.
Oh, I don't know if you see this in the chat.
That can't be real.
Research. It can't be real.
Oh no, I thought that was Lakers maps. I was like, no way.
The
Lakers
Lakers
Hornets trade has been rescinded. Awkward. Wow. Oh, great.
Wow. Which is kind of good for the Lakers because I feel like they could do better with what they had than getting Mark Williams.
Williams. I feel like this whole week has just been a podcast warning Lakers fans about how bad at defense Mark Williams is. Oh boy, that's interesting.
Yeah. That could get down a whole rabbit hole for me. I just was not a big fan of that trade.
I thought asset-wise it was weird.
Yeah. You gave up too much, in my opinion, for a guy who's such an unproven. Like, I get the lob threat. Yeah. I get the lob threat thing, but he's not going to lob if he's on the bench, you know?
Yeah. If he's not in the game, you can't throw him lobs.
You traded your injury-prone big man for another younger injury-prone.
Well, you traded him for Dalton, who is like the same age as him, and like also has defensive concerns.
Another guy who's I think as old as Luka or pretty close to it.
Yeah.
So
I didn't have like a super strong take on that trade. I feel like some people were like really anti, and it's like I don't know.
Well, I think it was in response to the people who were super optimistic. They're like, "Oh, we got a 7-footer who played at Duke, so he's probably a really good rim protector." And it's like, no.
Do we know why the trade was rescinded?
I don't know.
My guess would be medicals, but
he might not have passed the fifth
because he's gotten injured a lot.
I would venture to guess that. I guess like that keeps the door open for Dwight Howard to come back and play for the Lakers. You know?
So Fred Katz says, worth noting, if a player fails at physical before the trade deadline, then two teams can amend the trade to make it work. So you could see the trade still go through potentially, but maybe the picks aren't involved.
Could be.
But then if you're Charlotte, you're just like, no, that was the whole point.
Or maybe you throw in a guy like Rui and bring back like a bigger contract guy to kind of like.
I don't think you can do that. I think it's got to make the same players involved.
Like you can't keep the same players that were involved, but like
I think like amend the trade would mean like it's still got to be like a trade for Mark Williams involving Dalton Connect, but like the pick compensation would have to like.
You can't add more players on top of those players.
I don't think so. I don't know. I've never.
I gotta listen to Keith Smith, man.
I need like Keith Smith and like Nate Duncan to explain this to me on multiple podcasts to keep me busy throughout the week. So, man, all right, what a weird way to end the episode.
Talk about Ben Saraf.
Yeah, are there any other takes you want to throw out, or are we good there?
No, I'm good there. I just want so the rules now. I'm giving the rules afterwards. None of these takes can be held against us, unless they are true. Then we get to go back and then
we get to victory lap on them. And if we were wrong,
Exactly.
we get to not learn anything from it.
Those are the rules. Yeah. In the spirit, I borrowed this from The Ringer. Like I listen to NFL podcasts too, like believe it or not. Like I love multiple sports. And Shil Kapadia, who's like the host for like The Ringer's NFL show. And he always says for like this type of episode, like similar concept, he's like, these are locked up in a vault, like never to be brought up again unless we're correct. And then we get to go back and say that we were right. So.
Unlock them. Yep. Steven, what do you have cooking for NoCeilingsNBA.com currently?
Well, I just dropped a pretty in-depth,
very in-depth
grade.
Yeah, very good. Very good
in-depth grade Johnson piece. Thank you very much. And I feel like I could put this in here because it's kind of the same spirit. I think he's going to be the guy in this draft class that's like outside of like the top 3 that is going to be like a high return on investment type guy. Like a Zach LaVine or a Devin Booker, like that type of a player. And I list all the reasons why in this piece. It was so in depth that I didn't want to burden Nick with like looking up like scouting notes on top of it. Like this was the first piece that I didn't like, hey, I watched this player and he's kind of fun. You know, I didn't have that in my piece. But with that, to kind of tie a ribbon on how I normally do things, I think I'm going to do like a scouting notebook because Maxwell, I've watched a bunch of like Draft Sickos sleeper specials recently. And there are so many that I think like have a shot to be like kind of nice down the road. And I want to kind of give like a dedicated look on some of those names. A lot of the names you and I have been talking about, or I've been talking about with other people too. Like I'm very excited about some of these guys and I just want to kind of like start getting their name in circulation a little bit. Yeah. Outside of like, you know, scouts, executives, agents, and stuff like that. So just a lot of fun players out there playing college basketball that I think are worth a look. So
well, and like and like the other day, like I sent you like the tentative like no stone list for 2025. Like which is super tentative, but like I'm gonna start to circulate that off more people and dig for intel. But so far you and Nathan are the only two that have seen it. So you're very lucky. And then so but yeah, like there's a lot of interesting guys out there that are going to be around for a little bit that I think I'm excited to see who all you shine a light on there and see if maybe there's anyone I got to add on that list. My piece that will be out Monday is on learning from my scouting misses. So I talked about
I love those.
Just like the things that I feel like have shifted my draft philosophy the most in the last 3 years.
Why don't you just name them all right now? That way people don't got to go to NoCeilingsNBA.com and read them.
Because that way they have to go to NoCeilingsNBA.com and then they have to read them. And then when they read the article, they're going to get to the bottom and they're going to get to the section where they see that they get a bonus section in my column every single week if they sign up for No Ceilings Plus. So make sure you subscribe to No Ceilings Plus. Like Steven mentioned earlier in the show too, you get access to everybody's individualized big board if you are in there as well. So make sure you do that. And
I put scouting notes on mine too, like a hyperlink to like a Google Doc where you can like look up like their profile a little bit, see like very raw, like they're good at this, they need to get better at this, they stink at this, like all of that is included on mine. So I try to like make it a little bit more interactive for people who take the time to want to go look at mine.
Yep, that's really cool. So yeah, make sure you're going over there. I think that does it. Make sure you're following Steven at Steven G Hoops on Twitter and Blue Sky, at Boundboards on Twitter and Blue Sky. Like, subscribe, share, tell your friends about us, and we will see you all again next week.
If you're on YouTube, before you go, like and subscribe and share, please. Like, it helps out a lot. And I don't want to give a lot of details, but we're gonna have like a YouTube exclusive podcast type thing that someone on our team who's very creative and has a very good skill for this is going to start releasing soon. I've kind of already started seeing it a little bit. Ooh. Subscribe to the YouTube and turn on your noties and hit the likes.
That sounds good. So everybody go ahead and check those things out. We will see you all next week.
Much love, y'all.